Hey guys, welcome back to my second video. Today I decided we are just going to go ahead and get started right away. So as you can see, I have a jewelry stand hand here, and originally the idea was to have a dragon sitting up on the hand. So here I am making the armature outline for the dragon, but as I kept working on it, the dragon just didn't feel right. So it started to evolve into something a lot more different. I was determined, however, to make a dragon, so I'm bulking up the wire right here just to kind of get a feel for how I wanted the dragon to sit, and I kind of wanted it to be a chunky little boy, more of a lizard than a winged dragon, and after I created the armature for it, I started to move around with the placement of it to see how I wanted the dragon to sit, but the more I played with it, the more I realized I just wasn't happy with the whole dragon and the hand, and I thought maybe it was just the hand that was giving me the issues, so I decided later on to kind of fuss with it, and you'll see that a little bit. But for the first part here, it's just me trying to make this dragon actually fit the theme. Realizing I didn't like that first placement, here I am with a second placement that I hoped would actually work better for me. And I did like it a little bit better, but it just wasn't right. I thought maybe I'd like the project more if I made wings on the dragon, so here I am measuring out the wire for the wings, just to kind of make sure it's, all stable and balanced, and then creating the forms for it, and you'll see me using some tape and some other types of wire to secure it onto the little dragon that I was making. Whenever you're making wings, you always want to make sure you have some other type of wire or way to attach it to the main base of the creature. That way you have a little bit more stable, but also it provides more strength. So the wire here is supposed to provide more strength where it connects to the dragon itself. And this is where I decided that I had to change the hand. Maybe that was the reason why I wasn't so happy with it. So in my mind, I kept imagining an armored hand, and I wanted it to represent like a warrior's strength, something that was very harsh in reality, and I wanted it to be kind of a fantasy hand. So to make the claws, I ended up grabbing some fake nails that I had, gluing them on the fingertips, and then using some black epoxy to create the nails that you see here. And you can see me kind of applying some of that epoxy there just to kind of fill it out a little bit more to make it look like a gloved hand rather than just nails. And I made sure to grab a bunch of resources to look at different kinds of armored hands with spikes, kind of a fantasy realm looking thing. So I'm going to be starting to work on the hand here just to make it look like armor and get that warrior visage that I was looking for. I don't think I talked about epoxy before, but whenever using epoxy, you want to make sure you have some type of gloves on you when you're mixing the two components together, because it does cause a chemical reaction which could create an allergic reaction in your skin depending on how sensitive your skin is. But it's also best practice just to kind of make sure you're doing that to protect yourself from any kind of chemical reaction. You don't necessarily need to use the gloves while you're actually applying it, but I used it here because, one, the epoxy in this case is black and it stains horribly. As you can see, my gloves are already black. So just kind of keep in mind that you do want to use gloves whenever you're mixing the components together. And now here I have started to create the actual spikes for the armor, and as you can see kind of in the background, I have my paper, which is my reference. Now I'm making it similar to that style. I'm not making it exactly as that, as this is a fantasy armor, so I'm using it kind of loosely as an inspiration here. As I'm working here on this, I wanted to go ahead and get your guys' feedback. So do you guys enjoy having a full-length video like this? So it's about 30 minutes long and you get to hear me talk about the process and the project and all of that, or would you guys want something that's a little bit more condensed and has like there's some basic steps and then very quick process and then the end of result? Usually those can probably be a lot shorter, but I just wanted to kind of hear what you guys were looking for in these types of videos. Otherwise I was going to try to keep it as more of a tutorial / process type video. And of course you can always give me feedback here, and if you do want to support me through Patreon or just kind of reach out through Instagram, I do have those at Clayleaf Creations, and you can always just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to discuss different kinds of things and customs and just hear from you guys, because we're all a community of artists, so I'm always happy to hear what you guys have in mind and what you guys are working on too. So just keep that in mind. I am very open to having a whole community here. And now here's what the hand looks like with all the armor sculpted on, and now we have to paint it silver to represent all the different metal pieces, and then red for the leather to have some different color themes going on. And as I was doing this, I realized what the actual concept was going to be. So I wanted the hand to represent strength, strife, a warrior making it through. Something needed to contrast it, and the dragon just wasn't it. So I decided to go with a phoenix, which is something I find beautiful, fragile, passionate, inspiring. So I kind of made it into a warrior clawing its way through the ashes to begin anew. So as it came to life, I really wanted to represent fighting against cancer, fighting against a lot of health issues and problems that we may go through in life. I wanted this to represent that duality. It's hope, it's pain, it's change and rebirth, tragic as it is beautiful. We are all warriors, striving for our rebirth through our trials. So back to armature making. So here we are using that same wire that we used for the dragon, but this time it's going to be for the phoenix. So here I am making the outline for the main body of the phoenix, making sure we have that curve for the head, and then we'll be bulking it out with some more wire and some aluminum foil just so we don't have to use quite as much clay for it. And I will be using cosclay since it is a little bit more a little bit more flexible. That way it's not going to break as easily and we can use thinner pieces without worrying about it. And I decided I wanted to have little areas of like one little feather flying off of it, so we're going to be making a lot of different smaller little portions of wings to kind of hang off of it to make it look a little bit more dynamic, but I didn't do them correctly, so later on in the video you're going to end up seeing that they have been kind of snipped. The important thing to remember here is that just try, and try. Even if you fail, it's okay. Next time it's a learning experience, and so you know what to do next time and what not to do. So next time I make a phoenix, I'll probably try to reinforce the wire a little bit better. It just was too fragile and it wasn't working very well, and the clay that I was using ended up snapping and breaking. So it just didn't work out this time. But next time, we will have a better solution. And here, as with the dragon previously, I'm reinforcing the wings with some wire, and I have attached it to the main base. That way once we put the clay on, it is reinforced and it won't break as easily under the weight of the wings themselves. And also the wire here will help the clay grip a little bit better as well. In my first video with the giant dragon and the hummingbird, I had used tape as a way to anchor the wings, and so I decided I would try to do the same thing here, even though the wings are going to be a bit bigger and a little bit heavier, because I wanted it to be super light, and so tape as the main base seemed like the appropriate idea at the time. So here I am just kind of filling out the shape of the wings that I want with my scissors and just using regular masking tape here. And remembering what I did last time, I made sure that this time the tape area was going to be a lot shorter than what the actual wingspan was going to be, so we had the feathers going off of the skeleton here. And now to the fun part, adding clay to the sculpture. The armature always is the most time consuming for me and the part that I enjoy the least. I really enjoy just actually adding the clay on and starting to work with all the fun details. So here we are just making the formation of the head, and then we'll be adding in some of the eyes and stuff later, but here I just wanted to make sure we got that head formation going. And don't forget the blending. Lots and lots and lots of blending. Also be careful not to blend too much where you end up having tinfoil and stuff sticking out. Just be careful. Otherwise, yeah, blending. Pretty self-explanatory. And now the eyeballs! Usually the face is what helps me really get into the character of the creature that I'm creating. So eyes are super, super important to me, and just the face in general. And of course, more blending. This helps it actually fit into the face a little bit better, and if you just leave it the way it is without blending that area for the eye, it looks more stylized and less real, and I was definitely going for slightly more realism for this piece, so here we are, just blending in those edges. And now to the wings! So this is how I made each and every single one of those wings. I mean, feathers. So each feather I sculpted by hand. Of course, the ones that were on the body and you didn't need to see the underside, I forego the whole underside portion of it, but I wanted to make it look real again, so definitely adding a lot of texture for the front part and the back. I used a pretty sharp tool, which I don't know where this plastic thing came from, but it's been a really good tool, and it really creates those nice lines. So I've been using it a lot lately. I wish I could tell you where I found it. But yeah, so here I am just texturizing the feathers. And again, it's been hours and hours and hours of just making feathers. And I usually do each feather individually before I just place it directly onto the sculpture and then I start the next feather. I know generally you could probably just make a whole bunch of different kinds of feathers with different sizes and then apply it, but for the most part I like to do one by one. That way I can gauge the size of the next feather that I need. Also, I pre-baked the main sculpture, and then I added some epoxy glue, not epoxy glue, I'm sorry, some bacon bond. That way I could apply each of the feathers onto the sculpture and I wouldn't accidentally mess up the formation that I had going on, so the glue helps it actually stick. And this is what it looked like with partially done, and also with those random little feathers that I mentioned going outside of the phoenix there, which is so sad that they didn't actually get to stick. But enough about that. Back to creating more textures. So besides the regular feathers, I decided to add these closer towards the chest and the neck to make it look more ruffled and add a different kind of texture on top of it. Usually, from what I've noticed, birds have a slightly different texture around the head and neck area. So here we are just creating that form, and I'm sorry about the light in the background. Really got to do something about that window because kind of ruins things. But I'm just kind of pressing into the clay, creating some lines to make it look almost like a feathered type of area. Looks kind of like fur, so like feathered fur. Gives it a nice interesting texture, a little bit different. Going to be doing that same texture on the back of it here, slightly more feather shaped. And this is how I'm doing it with one of just my regular tools. It's a little sharp, and then once you're finished kind of ruffling it, I defined some of the outer edges so it looks like it's slightly more defined feathers rather than just a clump of hair. And also at this point, I think I baked it like 2 more times so that the bottom feathers wouldn't get smushed as I'm working with the top part here. So it was pre-baked a couple times. Once that was done, I needed to get rid of some of those little bumpy lines that you see. I wanted to keep a couple of them just so that it does look ruffled, but to get rid of some of that extra bubbles of clay that are kind of just sticking out there, I used a little bit of alcohol to go ahead and smooth out those lines and make it look a little bit more natural. And now time to switch media. This is now velvet clay or Amos clay. It's super light, so I'm going to be making the feathers out of this new material. As you can see here in a second, pulling on the clay with the sharp tool that I used, like the original wings and the original areas, it didn't work out very well. I just started kind of ripping the clay. So after this part of the video, I actually started to just indent it, kind of just pressing in that sharp tool and rather than pulling it out, and that kept the shape that I was looking for without completely ripping it. So with velvet clay, just kind of create indents, don't drag and pull. And this is how it looks when you start layering it. You put that first layer of feathers, which are the longest, and they go off of the tape, and then you add the second layer and the third and so on until you get to the top. You can kind of see that same process here underneath the wing, so you want to make sure you cover the underneath part of it as well, and make sure that the first layer that you put on the back is extending outward and these feathers underneath are just a little bit shorter, so you could actually have that one layer sticking out. Here we are with some pictures of what it looks like with all the feathers on, and then of course we're going to have our first layer of paint, which was mostly just white and a little bit of beige coming up right here. And then once we have that first layer set up, you can kind of see that the yellow is still present, but it's not quite too bad. And then from there we'll just start adding more oranges and reds and darker colors until we get this layered effect here.
So since I wasn't able to actually show you guys what it's like to airbrush, since I don't have that set up yet, I decided instead I'd go ahead and talk about the airbrush itself. So I have a Pash Talon USA, and I got this off Amazon. It came with its own kit of instructions and some cleaning supplies, different nozzles, so like this one and a couple other ones that came with it. I am in no shape or form a professional at this. I am still learning quite a lot about these airbrushes and how to use them properly and that kind of stuff, and I actually lost the instruction manual, so I had to learn a lot just by watching YouTube videos and figuring things out. So I've had a lot of issues with the airbrush, and I kind of wanted to use this space to go over some of the main things that I had an issue with as a beginner, so you guys can be somewhat prepared. And so what I have here is something called a gravity feed, and it's a single action or automatic. So gravity feed because it has the paint cup at the very top, and it actually is called an automatic because you just pull this and it like drops the paint down in here and the air comes up through here, and that together at the same time it just kind of sprays out the paint. There's a dual action one where you have like a pedal and stuff, and so you can adjust a little bit more to precision how much paint and how much air pressure going in separately. It really just depends on what you want to do and what you're trying to achieve. They both kind of do the same things. The dual action, like I said, is a little bit more precise sometimes with layering probably, but I've never used that one. I've only used this one, and this one is usually what's recommended for beginners. And it's pretty useful, I would say, for most of what I've been doing. And they're pretty expensive, so I kind of wanted to also go over how to clean it, how to take care of it, and all the things you should know. So let's go ahead and start off with how to take this apart, because you definitely need to take this apart multiple times to make sure you're cleaning it and getting it lubricated and all that fun stuff. So let's go ahead and start with that. So to take this apart, whoops, as I hit things, you take this part off here. So I'll just kind of show you how I go about taking these off, and you can see the brush here. I actually have it where I fudged up and it's a little bit crooked. I don't know if you can really see that, but be careful when you're cleaning and just, moving things around, because you can accidentally hit the tip, and that will cause the spray to be a little bit more difficult and sometimes cause more problems later on. And there's ways to file it so that it's pointy again and everything, but I don't know how to do that yet, and that's generally something that's not recommended right off the bat because you can hurt yourself. Always wear protective goggles and gloves and everything if you're trying to sand it down. There are pretty much lots of different kinds of videos that show you how to do that, but I've never done that, so I'm not going to even try to show you that. But just be careful when you're cleaning your tips. So you take this part off, and then you have this part here that actually is like when you're pulling it, this is where like the paint comes out. And usually what I've noticed is that, especially if you're using like acrylics, a lot of paint ends up drying around the tip, and you have to constantly take this off and clean it to make sure that it is not sticking on there and causing you to block things. I've done that several times already, and I constantly think it's clogged, but it's not. It's just something called dry tip, and you have to kind of be careful of that and just wash it regularly. And what I've done that helps me, that I've noticed, is I constantly use like a paint thinner and cleaner after every kind of coat that I'm using. That way it stays lubricated and you can kind of get the water off a little bit easier. I've heard that there's other ways that you can do like a glycerin combination at home or something like that, where you can lubricate the needle and so the paint is less likely to stick. So there's lots of different ways to try to help with that, but just keep in mind that there is an issue with dry tip, and that is something that you're going to have to clean constantly. Another thing I wanted to mention here is that you get this tool with your airbrush. Use it. So if you don't use this to tighten this area, what happens is it tends to come off with this, and so then you have your tip stuck to this and you can't actually clean it and make sure there's no more paint inside of it. So always make sure that you're tightening it with this so that doesn't happen. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And now your needle is exposed and you can clean that whole area. It's pretty easy to clean that with just like a sponge or something. And now I'm taking this side off here. This holds the needle in place. Make sure you have a designated spot so you can, wipe these down, let them dry. And then you just pull out your needle. And you have to constantly make sure you clean these after every use, because you don't want paint to get stuck in here and damage it later on. It causes corrosion and stuff like that. So just be very careful, make sure you clean this. So inside you have a little spring. Don't forget about your spring there. And this is what holds this part in place. So you can take that off. And ta-da! And you just clean every single portion of this and all the different things that we just took apart. And then to put it back, you'll see this, there's this little dot in the middle there. And you want to get this part right back in there. So I'm gonna, I don't know if you guys can see it really, but just lining it up. And then I'm holding it down. And then to put it back in, where's my piece? There it is. You want to make sure this part comes out, so you put that in there. It's up against the trigger. You get your spring. Okay. Keep holding that trigger down. Okay. Okay, that works. Next part I like to do is I like to put this in next. Again, you want to make sure you tighten that so it doesn't come off with the other piece and become a nightmare to try and dislodge. I have a tip that's now unusable because I cannot for the life of me get it to unstick. So don't do what I did. Make sure you tighten that really good. And this little doohickey here, yeah, I'm not very technical, you don't want to completely screw it in, because if you do like this, you're not going to be able to move the trigger at all. So this kind of helps with your precision and how much you can actually pull the trigger and how much air is actually coming in here into the chamber, and that will adjust your air pressure and your paint volume. So I'm going to loosen it up just a little bit. There you go. And then this is a protector for your needle. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back on here. And there you go. We just took apart and reassembled the airbrush. Now some kits come with this and not all of them do, but this is one of the tools that you can buy to help clean your airbrush. So this kind of pushes out some of the paint, and then you definitely have a whole bunch of different scrubbies that you can scrub out the paint, especially around like the nib and all that fun stuff so that it doesn't get caked onto anything. And one thing that doesn't come with the kit is this fancy thing. So this is like a paintbrush holder. So you could put this in here like this. And this is actually where you can put your like liquid cleaner in here and push this down once you have like your air pump going through here, and you can spray out your paint and your cleaner. That way you can clean your brush a little bit easier. It's a little filter, so we have an air filter here. But I didn't buy this originally when I first bought the airbrush, and let me tell you, this thing is a lifesaver. One, it holds your paintbrush, so you're not worried about holding it constantly as you're mixing your paints and adjusting things, so it's a nice little holder. But again, it helps you clean while you're working, so you don't have to completely take everything apart each time you're changing your coats. And it helps with the whole dry nib or dry needle, since you can use the cleaner to help get the water and clean off the needle without having to take it apart. You're still going to have to every once in a while because it's not like a perfect system, and dry needles do happen, but it does save a lot of time, and it has saved me from having to disassemble everything every 5 seconds. So I would highly recommend getting something like this to help you.
And with that, she is done. Let me know what you guys think, and of course, like, subscribe. Definitely appreciate any kind of constructive feedback, and would love to hear from you guys. I support a community of artists, so I'm always happy to hear from you. And let me know what you guys think I should do next time, and you can support me through Instagram or Patreon at Clayleaf Creations. Of course, Patreon has its own perks. You can be part of my process, surveys, get early access to things, so definitely worth it. I do to have a trial for free for about a week, I believe. So always happy to hear from you guys, and I also want to say thank you to my patrons, Stephanie and Jenny. Thank you so much for being part of the process with me, and definitely looking forward to hearing from all of you guys. I also have a website, www.clayleafcreations.com, and you can reach out to me there for customs, and I would always enjoy hearing from you guys. So I hope you have a great time and you enjoyed the video, and see you guys next month.